Hi everyone, this is Rosanna, Bright and Dusty, and usually my YouTube channel is all about cross stitch, but this Flosstube Extra is going to be specifically about punch needle and my very first punch needle project, which is this one. This is a design by Teresa Kogut, and in this video I'm going to take you through this project from the beginning until the end. And I'm going to specifically talk about what I learned as a beginner and what pitfalls I encountered, things that I learned. And I'm really excited. I'm so happy I was finally able to take the leap and stitch my very first punch needle project. I'll be talking about the type of needle I used, how I chose my floss, and the fabric, and just the process for the most part. This design is from Punch Needle and Primitive Stitcher magazine, which this one is the fall 2020 issue. I get it digitally. I printed out a color photo of the model so you'd have a good idea of what it looks like or what it's supposed to look like when it's done. um, and I did just want to say Punch Needle and Primitive Stitcher, they also have a ton of cross stitch projects in every issue. So it's not just punch needle. You're probably aware of that, but just in case you weren't, I wanted to clarify that this magazine has punch needle and it also has a lot of cross stitch, which is why I originally got a subscription. But now that I am interested in punch needle, I'm really happy to have so many different patterns to pick from. And this is their website. I don't get, I'm not like, this video is not sponsored by them or anything like that. I'm just bringing your attention to this magazine in case you hadn't heard of it. I really like it, and you can get either a print or a digital subscription. I have the digital, and this magazine comes out quarterly, so once per season, basically. All right, and I think that is all the introduction I need to do. I'm going to get right into it. So let's see how the first phase of my project went. Here are some quick thoughts about my first experience with punch needle embroidery. First of all, this is a finished one I had found thrifting a while back, and I think it's beautiful. I was very intrigued by this technique, and you can see this one is made up of really tiny loops. So this person must have been using a small a small punch needle to make the tiny loops. And then it looks like they mounted it to some kind of like tea-dyed fabric background there. And this is not a very nice frame or anything. But this is a beautiful punch needle. Oh, looks like I got a little hair here. So that's the first one I found. I did find another one recently, which I'll show. This is another punch needle. I don't think the loops in this one are quite as small as the flower basket, but this is still a really delicate one. And I assume the pink ribbon is breast cancer awareness. So I don't really know what the story is on this. I have found it thrifting, but I think it's really pretty. And I like the way they finished it with the ribbon border. and they mounted it to some kind of like this feels like wool, I guess. Um, but it's very pretty. And then yeah, this one had been professionally framed. So another beautiful punch needle finish. So these are kind of what inspired me to finally try punch needle. I have been planning to try it ever since last October of 2025, when I kitted a project, but I never managed to start. I finally have started. I'll show you in a minute my start, but I also wanted to show you these. So these I found thrifting a long time ago. These are really, really tiny. You can see my finger here. These punch needles are extremely small. And this set came with a booklet that is called Welcome to the Art of Russian Punch Needle Embroidery. Um, and I believe that this is a specific kind of punch needle where the loops are just tiny, 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 tiny. And originally I had wanted to learn how to use these. I quickly decided that that was just going to be way too advanced for a beginner. So I still have them. Eventually I would like to try it, but as a beginner, I didn't think it was a good idea to start off with the super tiny ones. So that brings me to what I did decide to do. I purchased the Ultra Punch. I know that Teresa Kogut recommends this one, and she's really good at punch needle. And then a lot of the people on YouTube who do punch needle tutorials, they also use the Ultra Punch because it's adjustable. You can raise or lower the height of your loops using these grooves here. Right now, I have the medium tip in the punch needle and or in the case, and I have it set at the smallest loop height, which is 1. It also comes with 2 other needles. They are marked S, M, and L for small, medium, and large. Like I said, I'm using the medium right now. These are the small and the large. And yeah, they've got plastic to kind of protect the tips. I will tell you, I started off by using the small one, and I didn't really know what I was doing, and I accidentally bent the tip of the small. I was able to bend it back. It didn't break, but the issue was I was pressing too hard on it, because I mean I was just kind of figuring out how it worked, and I realized it was probably a mistake to start with a small one because that one is probably the least durable. But like I said, it's okay. It didn't break, and I think I'll be able to use it. And then your Ultra Punch also comes with these threaders. They're really long because they have to fit through the entire casing. And they just have little tags on the end to try to prevent you from losing them. They're really easy to misplace. So the set comes with like 3 or 4 of these to thread your needle. And there's lots of beginner tutorials out there for like how to start out using the Ultra Punch. So I don't really think I need to add anything to that. I'm kind of trying to find tutorials that cover, aspects of punch needle that are not just like the absolute beginning steps. I like to find some videos that are a little bit more about the different techniques you can use to make your stitches neater and everything. But I'm still kind of searching for those. Those are less common than the beginner tutorials. And there is a spring inside the casing. It comes with two springs. This is for the large. The one I have in the casing is for the small and medium. So they're shaped slightly different. So that's the Ultra Punch. The project I have started here is, oh, sorry, that looks really big. This is from the fall 2020 issue of Punch Needle and Primitive Stitcher magazine. It is a design by Teresa Kogut. This is, you're seeing it reversed right now because you punch it from the back side. This is the back. And I will show you what I have so far as like what it looks like on the front. This looks kind of terrible, and I don't care what my back looks like. Backs are supposed to look terrible in my opinion. uh, and then here is what it's looking like on the front. So I am a beginner, and this is just my start. What I have noticed, as you can see, I've started filling in the pumpkin. I did the outlines. The outline was in a darker DMC. The inside is a 3776, that kind of burnt orange color. And as I'm filling in the inside, it's kind of cool because it's sort of pressing on the border areas and making them look a little nicer, in my opinion. So I like the way this pumpkin is turning out. I did the crow first. I don't like the crow as much, but then again, I also haven't filled in the outside yet, so that might end up looking a little bit better after I do that. But yeah, this is my start. You can sort of see a side view here. The loops, you see they're kind of raised up from the fabric. They're really tightly packed, which is really neat. The texture is just so fun to feel with your fingers. I don't know. It's just a very interesting craft to me because on the one hand it looks kind of messy and it looks kind of chaotic, but there are aspects of it like the texture that I really love. So anyway, this fabric is called weaver's cloth. That's the kind of cloth that you have to use specifically for this type of punch needle. um, I'm using like 6 strands of DMC here, and the weaver's cloth is designed to hold the tension of the embroidery floss. And the company that makes the Ultra Punch also sells weaver's cloth in like 1 yard packs. Okay, so that's my start. I'll just talk a little bit for a second about threads. The reason I chose this particular design is because Teresa Kogut charted it in DMC for the most part. And actually, I think there might be an option for like fancy floss. Actually, no, I'm looking at the color key right here, and it's like it's all DMC except for one, Weeks Dye Works, I think. Yeah. And that's pretty unusual. Usually punch needle, I've noticed in punch needle and primitive stitcher magazine, usually they are charted in like Valdani, which it's this is a DMC. This is a pearl cotton, but the Valdanis are pearl cotton and they come on these like balls. And for my very first punch needle, I didn't want to invest a lot of money in buying a bunch of Valdani pearl cotton because I didn't know if I was going to like it. I didn't know if I was going to like punch needle. And I will tell you, this technique, filling in all these areas, it will eat through your floss like crazy. So I'm glad I chose one that specifically was charted in DMC just so I could get the hang of it and decide, going forward if I actually want to invest in some Valdanis in the future for a different project. Now, the other thing, the other reason I believe that these are not typically charted in DMC is because if you're going to use small loops, you have to separate the floss. I chose, just for simplicity's sake, I chose to use the medium tip because you can go up to 6 strands. And I didn't want to sit here fumbling around separating 3 strands of embroidery floss. Um it's no problem to separate 1 strand or even 2 strands, but for me separating 3 strands, I'm just constantly getting knots. It's very frustrating. So I didn't want to be sitting here separating 3 strands of embroidery floss every time I had to load, a color. So I just decided, okay, I'm doing 6 strands. I'm using the medium, even though my stitches are going to be a little more bulky than I might like. But that ended up being the right choice, especially for my first punch needle, because I can just use a bobbins. As you can see, this one's like all unwound here because you have to have it unwound because the floss is feeding through your needle so quickly. It does not take long to just use all this up. And it's easier to do it with a bobbin because it can just like unwind super easy. Also I have a black, because that crow had a lot of black. This was just a skein of 310, and I unwrapped it and I just, made it so it was free floating and it could load into the punch needle without any problem. So that's the thing about the floss, because when I originally was reading Punch Needle and Primitive Stitcher magazine, I was kind of confused. I was like, why are these all charted in Valdani pearl cottons? Why are they all charted with these balls? And now I understand why. Like, you don't have to separate anything, and then it just unwinds from the ball, very easily. You don't really have to fiddle around with it. Like I said, this is a DMC pearl cotton. I was kind of fooling around with this on, a scrap area of the weaver's cloth just to see how it would be like in the punch needle. This is a pearl cotton number 8, um, which you can use in the small needle. So I was kind of fooling around with that, and I now understand why these are charted with the pearl cottons, because it's just a lot easier to work with one strand that you don't have to divide. In the medium, I believe, you would use a pearl cotton number 5. And just as a side note, I did kind of play around with that a little because I realized I have all these cheap. These are threads for making friendship bracelets. They're called, all it's called on here, if you can see that, it's called craft thread. And the brand is Iris. And I found a huge bag of this stuff and I was like, well, I don't know what I'm ever going to use this for. It's not suitable for cross stitch. But I'm thinking it would be suitable for punch needle in the medium tip. Because this is equivalent to DMC Pearl Cotton number 5. This might be slightly, very slightly thicker, but they are pretty close. And you can see the texture is the same. So now I'm thinking, maybe I could get some use out of this craft thread. And it is 100% cotton. It's not trash. I could actually use these for something. And I have all kinds of colors here to work with. And that might just save me some money buying pearl cottons, The thing is, I would have to use the medium, so my loops would be kind of on the bigger side. But I did a little experiment with that. You can see this little pink spot up here. That was an experiment with one of those iris craft threads. And this is the back of it. And I don't know how well, I don't know how well you can see that. That is the front. Yeah, it's trying to focus on my hoop. There we go. So, that looks pretty good. So that was kind of cool. Just another way to maybe use up some of that craft thread. We'll see. I'm probably not going to use it on this. I'm planning to just use the DMC on this. But on the other hand, I am kind of looking at this project as more of like my experiment, to see what kind of threads will work, what kind of techniques work best for me. But anyway, I'll try to add on to this video as I make more progress on this project. I would like to finish up that pumpkin and see what he's going to look like. Okay, here we are, another day, and as you can see, I have made some more progress on my very first punch needle project. And since the last clip, I have been able to find a couple of punch needle video tutorials that were a little more advanced. And I'm going to link them below. One of them was from Primitive Gatherings, the company, and that one is about 2 years old. And the presenter, her name's Lisa, she kind of takes you step by step through the whole process, but she has a lot of knowledge about punch needles, so she also gives some really good tips throughout that video. So that was really helpful. The other video I watched, that one was about 7 years old, and I don't believe that person makes videos anymore. But I will link it below. She was doing a really detailed punch needle with the tiny loops. And that was very interesting to hear her talking about the different needles she was using and just her technique. So I will link both of those below. And just through those 2 videos alone, and also through perusing a little bit of Punch Needle Primitive Stitcher magazine again, I have learned some new things that I'm going to share. And the first thing is most of the people, or the two people I watched and then the magazine as well, were in agreement that, three strands for, this size of punch needle is ideal. And as I told you before, I had been using six strands to do the pumpkin and the crow, because of the issues with separating the floss. But after watching those tutorials, I was like, okay, I'm gonna switch up what I'm doing. I want to try it with three strands. Um, so that's what I've started doing in these triangles. This one is totally in three strands. All these outlines of the triangles are in three strands. And okay, let's talk about the strand thing. The three strands versus the six strands when you're working with DMC. So one thing, I was looking through the most recent issue of Punch Needle Primitive Stitcher, which is summer 2026. I was just kind of browsing the magazine. I get it digitally, so I printed this out, but this was one of the projects in there. Uh, Coincidentally, this one's also charted in DMC, which is unusual, but I noticed in the supply list up here and also in the instructions, the designer mentioned this quick split clip. In the instructions, she says this tool is helpful to separate three strands of DMC embroidery floss. And then there's like a link to the shop that sells that. So I went to the shop and searched this term. And to me, what it looked like was one of these, a wonder clip. And I was like, okay, it looked exactly like this. So I tried it with a wonder clip that I already had. I also tried it with just a regular wooden clothespin here, as a technique for separating three strands of embroidery floss. And it actually works. What you do, okay, so here is DMC 680, which is in this project. This is the six strands before it's separated. As you can see, I have a pretty long, oops, sorry for shaking the phone there. I have a pretty long strand or cut here of six strands because, for filling in these triangles, you kind of need a lot. And it's very simple. All you have to do is clip the wonder clip or the clothespin to one end. And this works for both. And then since this is such a long strand, you would have to probably stand up. And then you let this hang down basically like close to the floor. It's hanging there. And you're holding the other end. And the weight of this allows you to separate the three strands very, very easily. And I was really surprised. It totally works. And now I don't have to struggle with separating the three. I'm going to try to insert a little clip of me actually doing this so you can see what I'm talking about, if I'm able to figure out how to film that. But I hope that makes sense. This is because it's weighing down the six strands like towards the bottom of the floor. Um, it's creating some tension, which allows you to then basically you're kind of like it spins a lot. It spins around, but it separates no problem. So that was my first tip, a little update from what I had been talking about last time. That's going to make it a lot easier to work with the DMC and to do the 3 strands like most of these charts recommend. Most of them do not recommend 6, and I think the reason is just because it's a little harder physically on your hand. Um because yeah, it's just you're pressing the punch needle harder than you would when it's 3 strands. So it's probably putting more wear and tear on your needle. It's also kind of like stressing out your hand. I was noticing my hand getting a little tired doing this pumpkin with the 6 strands. I mean, if you take a close look here, this is a little bit looser. It's not as tightly packed, but that also means, because this is a 3 strands, that also means that it's easier to punch. This was a little bit more difficult because it was so tightly packed. All right. So that was my first comment about the strand problem. The other thing, as I was going through Punch Needle and Primitive Stitcher, the most recent issue, there was also this project. This is a project of a cow. It's actually really pretty. Maybe I would do that. But as you can see, and this was also mentioned, I think, in one of the tutorials I watched. I was talking about the Valdanis in my last, clip about this project. And I had thought Valdani only came in pearl cotton in the different sizes, but actually Valdani manufactures specifically a 3 strand ball of embroidery floss. It's already divided into 3 strands, so you don't have to divide it. As you can see, this project mixes them. It calls for the 3 strand balls in some cases and then the size 8 balls in other cases. And they're kind of, mixed in here. You can see 3 strand, 3 strand, 3 strand, 3 strand, 3 strand, and then this is size 8. This is size 8. And then it calls for a few DMCs, 3 strand. So I didn't realize that Valdani made specifically a 3 strand ball, but that's kind of interesting moving forward. If I want to kit a project in Valdani and I don't want to use a pearl cotton, I could use a 3 strand. Here I'm just going to show how to, well, here I'm threading the needle with the threader. And then this is 3 strands of embroidery floss that I separated from 6 strands. So it's going through the threader, then I'm pulling it through the blue casing. You can see it comes out there the other end. This step here is important. You have to thread it again through the eye of the needle. You can see that tiny hole there. It has to get threaded through there as well, or else your punching is not going to work. Believe me, that I made that mistake basically the first time I was trying this. So it's very easy. You're just pulling it through the eye. All right, and now I'm just retracting the thread a little bit so that my tail is not super long. And this thread is going to be used to fill in one of those triangles that I've already outlined. And here I am starting to punch through the weaver's cloth. You don't want to raise the needle very much. For the most part, it is staying in contact with the top of the fabric. And then you're just punching in very short increments. And I'm just following the outline I already did with the other thread. Here you can see Yeah, like I'm jumping over. In cross stitch, we would call it traveling. When I reach a point, or I reach the end of the row, or I have to skip over another piece of thread. Here, I think I'm going to do it again up here. Basically, you want to hold on to the top of the fabric where the thread is so it doesn't pop out. There we go. Okay, that's one where I was traveling a little bit. So as long as you press your finger on the thread there, then it won't pop out as you travel. It shouldn't pop out when you're just doing little rows like this. And you can see I'm going pretty quickly. I mean, I know people who are more seasoned at this go very fast, but it's really not taking all that long to fill it in. And I'm just going here until the thread runs out. You can see that it has been depleting. I only have a little bit left there. And this whole time it's just been running through the blue casing. Once it runs out, all you do is gently pull your needle up so it's a little bit off the fabric and you can snip your thread. And here I am about to do that. Again, you're being a little careful because you don't want to pop the thread out. It's not a big deal if that happens. You just do it, you just punch it again. But you're trying not to pull the threads out of the fabric. And those few little places where I was traveling, there are little loops that now need to be snipped. So that's what I'm trying to do here. Okay, there we go. You see that little loop there? It just needs to be snipped so that it doesn't catch when I'm filling in the rest of the triangle. And that's about it. And here is the view of the front where I just filled in that little area. And it looks pretty good. Once everything is filled in, it tends to look better. But I think that looks pretty good. You probably noticed in that clip that I was, rotating my stand as I was going. That's because you want to punch in the same direction. Like, I am punching towards me, and I find it to be a little bit easier to rotate the stand so I can just keep doing that. Um, and as I get, better at this, I'll probably be able to figure out more of an efficient way to do that. But for right now, I'm not bothered by having to rotate the stand around. And the reason I'm able to do that is just because this is a Morgan embroidery stand. So as you can see, it's a double hoop. There's a hoop on the bottom that you could use for like a smaller project. There's a hoop on the top. And then they're just connected with these legs. So I can just kind of rotate it around the top of the table here, no problem. And that's kind of the simplest way I found to do this so far. I know that there are other punch needle stands that are constructed a little bit differently. I know that the Morgan stands are definitely recommended for beginners. And the other thing is that it's super portable. You can take it anywhere. I've been a lot more comfortable doing punch needle on the flat surface of a tabletop. I haven't tried to do it in my lap or anything like that. Maybe I will down the road. But right now, I'm trying to just keep things consistent, and I've decided to stitch this one on a tabletop, and that's been working out okay. Next, I'm just going to insert that very short clip where I'm showing how to separate the 6 strands of embroidery floss into 3 strands using the Wonder Clip. So I'm going to insert that now. As you can see, I am swiftly closing in on a finish here, and I think this will be the last clip I film before I'm able to reveal my very first punch needle finish, and I'm super excited about that. But I just wanted to offer a few final thoughts that I either forgot to mention or just to sum up my experience here. So on the back, I think you can notice, even in the short time I've been doing this, how much I've improved. Um, the crow, and then to a certain extent the pumpkin, they have these areas that are really bulky, uh, where the threads were kind of bunching up. Partly that's because I didn't really know what I was doing, partly it's because I was using the 6 strands in those areas. And then once I started doing the 3 strands and I was a little more comfortable with the needle and the fabric, um, it's looking a lot cleaner in the border area, in the triangles. So that's encouraging that even within a short span of time, I was able to make a lot of improvement. One thing I wanted to clarify from one of my earlier clips, I had said, you punch in the same direction. What I meant was you have to punch with this beveled edge going in the direction you're punching. So yeah, you can do it. I've been doing it toward myself because it's easier to see, and that's why I've been sort of turning the stand. But you could, punch it like that as long as this is pointing in the direction you're going. If you were to do it backwards, okay, if you were to go like this, that is how you're going to bend your needle or break it, like I almost did, and your loops are not going to look right. So you always have to be going like that or like this. Um, and presumably you could do it like this, although I feel like you wouldn't be able to see it very well, which might be confusing. So anyway, that's why I have been pretty much doing either like that or like this. Um, the other thing I wanted to mention, so this is the back. You can see areas like here I haven't filled in between the pumpkin and the triangle there, and it's kind of a narrow spot. But on the front, you can see the white peeking through. The fabric is peeking through because I haven't filled that in totally. And that's what you need to be aware of, is that you can always go back and fill in sparse areas. Like, to me, this triangle looks a little bit sparse. Like, I can see a little bit of the fabric peeking through. And then I think this side of the triangle could be refined a little bit more. And I'm probably going to go back and fill some of that stuff in when I'm finished. The other thing you want to do is examine the front and look for areas where the loops might be sticking up. Because what you can do is actually just clip them. so that they're the same height as the surrounding area. Uh, because you have to remember the tension of the fabric is holding in your thread. So the thread isn't gonna pop out unless you like pull it. So you can always snip a loop that might be a little bit too high if you want to make your surface more even, because the thread will still stay in there. It's just going to have a slightly different texture, but you're not going to be able to notice when it's just one loop in a square inch or whatever. Um, so that's some tips for just cleaning up the front when you're finishing. Uh, and then since I'm coming to this from the perspective of being a cross stitcher, I wanted to go through what I've come up with as like the pros and cons of punch needle from the perspective of someone who's coming at this from cross stitch. And I realize this kind of aesthetic is not going to be for everyone. Cross stitch is a lot more geometric, it looks a lot neater. And if that's something you really value about your art, then you're probably not going to respond to this kind of design. But for people who do enjoy the prim kind of aesthetic here, I think there are some pros to doing punch needle in addition to cross stitch. First of all, if you're someone who really, really enjoys working with fancy floss, this would be really fun because, for instance, you could kit it with those beautiful variegated Valdanis and get the experience of just working with all those different kinds of variegated threads. You can also use variegated embroidery floss. You know, if you separated the three strands like we talked about, so you could use Weeks Dye Works, you could use Gentle Arts. Um, the background I've been doing is variegated. It is this thread. This is a Needle Necessities, which is not in production anymore, but I happen to have a couple skeins in my stash. I had two 20-yard skeins of this color, so I was like, okay, well, that better be enough. And it's going to be enough. I don't think I've even used half of that first skein there yet. But yeah, I've been using variegated for the background, and it looks really, really cool. So if that's something that you find really fun about cross stitch, working with the fancy floss, then punch needle would also be really fun. Um, and you can see it really easily too because you're filling in pretty big areas here. Okay, so another pro when we're thinking about this in comparison to cross stitch is that punch needle is faster, so it is more of an instant gratification type of thing. Um, and I think that that's kind of nice, just in terms of, well, if I finish a big cross stitch project and I want to break, and I want something that's going to be quicker, then I could do a punch needle and have it finished up in whatever, like a week, 2 weeks. And I think that's an aspect that I would get enjoyment out of punch needle, because oftentimes if I finish a big project in cross stitch, then I'll do a small just to cleanse the palette. I don't want to jump into something giant right away, so that's kind of nice. Um Another pro I would say is that you don't have to use as much equipment. And I'm thinking you don't have to use your iPad, you don't have to be using Pattern Keeper, um, because the pattern itself is traced onto the fabric, and then you're filling it in based on the color code provided in the pattern. And you don't have to be staring at your iPad the whole time. Um, and the equipment itself is pretty simple. You know, you just need the needle, you need the thread, and you need some kind of hoop or stand. And you need to make sure it's one of these hoops that has the interlocking edge so it stays really, really tight. Another benefit of punch needle is that it is easier to see it. If you struggle with seeing cross stitch fabric, this is way, way easier. For all of my cross stitch, I use a dedicated light for that, so I can see the cross stitch fabric. For this, I didn't need to use any special light. I was, in this room. I had the lights on, obviously, but no special light. I didn't have to strain my eyes. And that's another good way to just take a break. Because if you're cross stitching and you're working on something, you're working on like a 40 count and you finish a project and you're just like, you want to give your eyes a rest, this is a good way to do that. And then I think the last thing I came up with was, it's easier to frog. I actually don't know what the term would be in punch needle. I'm just going to call it frogging. But if you have to take your stitches out, um, in cross stitch, that's kind of a huge deal if you make a mistake. In punch needle, it's not a big deal at all. I can show you here. All you have to do is pull the stitches out, and there they go. You just pull them out, and then you can stitch them again. So frogging is not a huge deal. It's also just kind of easier to cover up. As I was saying, like, if you have empty spots, if you have mistakes, it's easier to deal with those than it is in cross stitch. The cons that I came up with were I could see this getting pretty expensive, especially if you want to use the overdyed fancy floss, because as I said, you will run through your floss a lot faster than you will in cross stitch, and you also won't have as many leftovers. Um, so that's just something to bear in mind. Like I said, this is a 20-yard skein of a needle necessities that I'm using for the background. I think I'm a little bit over halfway done with it. So what? I probably used 7 yards, 8 yards. And by the end of it, I'm probably going to use 2/3 of this skein. So yeah, it might get kind of pricey, if you're buying those Valdani pearl cottons or the Valdani 3-strand. And related to that, another con would be, it's harder to source materials. For instance, I mean, from what I can tell, sorry, I shook the phone again. From what I can tell online, the Ultra Punch is basically the only game in town. I don't I don't know if there's another brand right now of like a really good punch needle. There used to be another brand called the CTR, but they have gone out of business. So yeah, I mean, you don't really have a choice. You have to source the Ultra Punch. You have to source the weaver's cloth. Um, which, not every needlework shop is going to have this stuff. I think a lot of them would, but And then the 3-strand Valdanis or the pearl cotton Valdanis, you know, not every place is going to have those. And the other con I came up with was that, if you are a stitch in hand person, you can't do that with punch needle. You have to use some kind of hoop or stand. It is the only way because this fabric has to have very tight tension on it or it's not going to work. And related to that, as I said, I've been more comfortable working on the tabletop here. So it is a little bit limiting in where I can do it. Maybe as I get more comfortable, I will be able to switch up where I'm punching. But for right now, I am a bit limited in. Yeah, I'm in like my TV room, and this is kind of the only place I can do it. I could do it in my craft room if I cleaned off my desk, like that's ever gonna happen. And then eventually I might be able to learn how to do it on my lap, but yeah, those were a few cons that I was able to um, think of. But I think the end of the story is, would I do another punch needle project? Absolutely. I thought this was so fun. It was really great to learn a new craft. I can't wait to see what this is going to look like when it's done. And I can't wait for my next project when I know it's going to be better. Um like is this going to turn out exactly like the model photo? Definitely not. I was brand new at punch needle, and I'm okay with that. I'm really proud that I was able to pull this off and learn how to do it through some YouTube videos, and I'm excited for whatever comes next. And there's tons of punch needle patterns in punch needle and primitive stitcher, and all you have to do is you trace. For instance, here is a paper printout of a punch needle chart. All you have to do is put your weaver's cloth over this and you trace the design. That's what I did. I traced it with a fine Sharpie. So if you have a paper template here, you can trace it out. And then I know that some companies, I don't know if they do this anymore. Some of them would used to print it directly on the weaver's cloth. I have a few of these that are actually printed on the fabric, but I don't know. Those might be few and far between these days. The thing about punch needle is that I don't I don't think a ton of people do it, and then a lot of companies just decide, okay, I'm not gonna make charts anymore. Not gonna make needles anymore. So that's kind of sad. And that's one of the reasons I did this entire, video, which at this point has become way too long, but it is to just hopefully give some encouragement for anyone who's thinking of trying this out, because I don't want to see all these companies going out of business, and I would like to be able to do punch needle in the future. All right, I've rambled a lot, and in my next and final clip, it will be the big reveal of my finish. As promised, here is my finish of this beautiful Halloween design by Teresa Kogut. And I started this on July 24th, and I finished it early this morning, July 29th. So that was less than a week. And granted, I was working on it quite a bit, so I don't expect most of my punch needle projects would be that fast, but that does give you a sense of how quickly these projects can go. So last time I was talking about the background floss that I use, which was one of these needle necessities. These come in, or these came in 20-yard skeins. They don't make these anymore. 20-yard skeins. Here's what I have left from the skein that I used. I did measure, and it ended up being a little over 5 yards left over. So I used about 15 yards for the background. All these like gray areas you see around the triangles and in here, the fill in, all of that was approximately 15 yards of 6-strand embroidery floss that I divided into 3 strands. So that gives you a sense, if you were to use a Weeks Dye Works, which I believe they come in like 5 yards, it would have taken about 3 skeins to do this project, which this project really isn't that big. I didn't measure it, but I think it's about 6 inches wide and 6 inches long. That's what it looks like to me. Actually, I have a tape measure right here. How convenient. I I didn't plan that. Yeah, it's about 6 inches. So that's not really that big. There are bigger punch needle projects. So you do go through quite a bit of floss to punch these. Oh, let's see. I will say, in order to use the 6-strand embroidery floss, I was using the Wonder Clip technique every single time. Every single time I needed a new length of 3 strands, I used this, as I demonstrated earlier, and it worked beautifully. This is just going to open up a lot of possibilities for me to use whatever floss I want. I can use DMC and keep the cost down. I can use overdye floss I have in my stash. And for a fancier project, I might go ahead and buy the Valdanis. Um, I'm lucky I live about 45 minutes from Hobby House Needleworks up in Victor, New York. So yeah, I could potentially, for one of my next projects, go up there and just purchase the Valdani directly. And that might be kind of fun for a special project. And I'm pretty happy with the way this turned out. You can see in the model photo here, my pumpkin, I had considered maybe ripping out the mouth and the eyes and the nose and doing them over again with the 3 strands and trying to get a little more definition like was in the picture here. But I just decided this was my first project. I'm okay that, I was learning. I'm okay that it's not exactly like the picture. And I think it looks spooky. I think it gets the point across that I was trying to get. That this is just a spooky, weird Halloween scene. Next time in a new project, when I am using the 3 strands, I think my outlining will have a lot more definition. I could get finer lines for the expressions in the face of a different project. I also accidentally reversed these colors in the eyes, and that's simply because I read the color key wrong, the diagram. I accidentally reversed them, but it's okay. All in all, this was a really fun project. I'm already looking through Punch Needle and Primitive Stitcher magazine for what I might want to do next. I am thinking it might be a Christmas project. I could probably insert a few pictures here of the projects I'm thinking about. Some of them look like they're quite advanced, so that might be maybe I should hold off until I'm a little more experienced. But there are some that look doable. And yeah, I'm just gonna have fun kitting that up, getting it started, and maybe doing a Christmas punch needle. And in the future, I could still make use of these craft threads that are like number 5 pearl cotton. I think it would just have to be for a different style of project. One where the threads need to be a little bulkier, where the colors are really bright. And I do have that on my radar as just something to think about. And maybe it would be a pattern that's not from Punch Needle and Primitive Stitcher. Maybe it would be more of a different style pattern that I find elsewhere. But I am thinking about that just because I want to experiment. I want to see if I can use some of these threads. And I think that would be really fun too. Well, I'm trying to think if there's anything else I want to say. I hope that you feel encouraged to try punch needle if you've never done it before. If you have done punch needle, please let me know in the comments. Let me know what kind of projects you've done. I would love to hear. Or let me know if you're thinking about trying it out. Even in this short time, basically within the length of a week, I was able to learn some fantastic new tips and tricks to make this process a lot more fun and easy. My next video will be a regular floss tube that is about cross stitch, so I hope you'll join me for that, which will probably be in the next couple of weeks here. All right, until the next time, happy punching!